The sleek diplomatic vessel of the Galactic Confederacy loomed over Earth's orbital station, its hull gleaming with strange metallic patterns that seemed to shift colors in the starlight. Captain Juan Park stood at attention on the bridge of the HSS Thunderchild, watching the main view screen as the alien ship approached. This was humanity's first official diplomatic meeting with the Confederacy, and everything needed to go perfectly. "Status report," Park said, her voice steady despite the tension that filled the bridge. "All systems nominal, Captain," replied First Officer Doyun, his fingers dancing across the control panel. "Our shields are at minimum power as requested for the diplomatic approach." Park nodded. Earth's United Defense Force had debated for weeks about how to present themselves to the Confederacy. In the end, they decided honesty was best, with certain omissions. The Thunderchild would represent humanity, but its true capabilities would remain hidden. "Open communications channel," Park ordered. The view screen flickered, revealing the command center of the alien vessel. 3 different species stood there: the insectoid thorax, with their chitinous exoskeletons, the towering azure-skinned Galari, and the squat, 6-armed Krell technicians working in the background. "Greetings, representatives of Earth," said the Galari figure in the center. "I am High Emissary Xalto of the Galactic Confederacy. We welcome you to the greater cosmic community." Park bowed slightly. "On behalf of Earth and all humanity, we are honored to meet you. I am Captain Juan Park of the HSS Thunderchild." As she spoke, she noticed the subtle shifts in the alien's postures. The insectoid thorax antennae twitched, and a strange clicking sound emerged from its mandibles. The translator in her ear rendered it as laughter. "This is your flagship?" Ambassador Torek asked, mandibles clicking rapidly in what humans had quickly learned was their expression of amusement. "We expected something more impressive from a species attempting to join the Confederacy." Park maintained her composed expression despite the insult. The Thunderchild was designed to be unassuming, a strategy, not a weakness. Its simple gray hull housed technologies that had been kept secret even from most of Earth's own citizens. "It is," Captain Park replied evenly. "We're proud of the Thunderchild." The Galari emissary's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "Indeed. Well, it is certainly adequate for a species at your development stage. We have prepared quarters aboard our vessel for your diplomatic team. We suggest you bring no more than 10 representatives." "We appreciate your hospitality," Park replied. "Our team will prepare for transfer immediately." When the communication ended, Park turned to Communications Officer Minji. "Send word to the diplomatic team, and alert Science Director Kim and Admiral Lee that we've made first contact." Hours later, in the privacy of the diplomatic quarters aboard the alien vessel, Science Director Haijin Kim adjusted her formal uniform and looked around the room. The Confederacy had provided them with spacious accommodations, though the furniture was clearly designed for bodies different from human ones. The walls pulsed with a faint blue light that seemed to follow their movements. "Well, that wasn't quite the welcome I expected," Admiral Juno Lee said quietly, inspecting the strange object that resembled a fruit. "They're not even trying to hide their condescension." Kim nodded, careful to keep her voice low. "Did you notice how they scanned the Thunderchild? At least 12 different sensor sweeps during our approach." "I noticed," Lee replied, "and their reaction when they found nothing of interest." He mimicked the clicking sound they'd heard from the thorax. Kim moved closer, ostensibly examining a piece of alien art on the wall, but actually using the movement to mask her words from any potential listening devices. "Their technology is advanced, but their sensors clearly couldn't penetrate our quantum shielding. They have no idea what the Thunderchild carries," Kim whispered. Lee's expression remained neutral, but his eyes reflected concern. "Let's hope they never need to find out," he replied. A soft chime interrupted their conversation as the door to their quarters slid open. A Krell entered, its 6 arms moving in perfect coordination as it carried a tray of what appeared to be food and drinks. "Honored humans," it said through the translator, "the Council awaits your presence. Please follow me to the Great Chamber." As they walked through the gleaming corridors of the alien ship, both Kim and Lee maintained careful observation of everything around them. The Confederacy's technology was impressive. Gravity control that made the deck feel perfectly stable, lighting that adjusted automatically to their visual needs, and doors that seemed to anticipate their approach. How many member species form the Confederacy? Kim asked their guide, hoping to gather information. 27 full members, 16 partial members, and 42 protected species, the Krell answered promptly. You will be classified after evaluation. Lee raised an eyebrow at Kim. Protected species. Those not yet deemed advanced enough for full membership, the Krell explained without slowing its pace. Species requiring guidance and protection until they mature. Kim noticed how Lee's jaw tightened at that statement. Humanity had achieved faster than light travel only 15 years ago, and had spent most of that time expanding cautiously through their local star systems. The discovery of alien signals had led to this meeting, but clearly the Confederacy had been watching them for longer. They entered a vast circular chamber where representatives of at least a dozen alien species sat in tiered seating. At the center stood a holographic display showing a perfect replica of the Thunderchild, rotating slowly for all to examine. Behold, announced a Tauric official, the flagship of humanity, their most advanced vessel. A ripple of what could only be described as amusement passed through the assembly. Its propulsion system uses basic antimatter containment, continued the Tauric, and its weaponry consists of primitive nuclear missiles and particle beams. Defensive capabilities include a magnetic shield system that would barely withstand our standard greeting protocols. More clicking laughter filled the chamber. Kim felt her cheeks flush with anger, but maintained her diplomatic smile. The aliens were analyzing an empty shell. The Thunderchild was designed to appear primitive to outside scans. Its true heart, the quantum displacement engine and the singularity weapon, remained undetected, shielded by technology developed in secret over decades. We welcome our human visitors, said High Emissary Salto, raising four-fingered hands. We shall observe your development with interest and offer protection as you grow. Perhaps in a century or two, you might qualify for partial membership. Later that night, as the Earth delegation prepared to return to the Thunderchild, Admiral Lee pulled Captain Park aside along with Director Kim. They've classified us as a protected species, Lee said, his voice tight with controlled anger. Effectively, we're being treated as children. Park's expression remained neutral. Let them think what they want. The Confederacy clearly values technological advancement above all else. They've judged us based on what they think they know. Kim nodded. Their arrogance works in our favor. Better they underestimate us than fear us. Park looked out the viewport at her ship, the unassuming gray vessel that housed humanity's greatest secret. The Thunderchild had been built not for show but for survival, carrying a weapon they had prayed would never be needed. We'll play along, Park said quietly. For now, we're just primitive humans grateful for their guidance. And if they ever threaten us? Lee asked. Park's eyes hardened as she watched the Confederacy representatives laugh among themselves. Then they'll learn why Earth never had any truly dominant species. We've always had to share our world and fight for our place in it. Defense Minister Teu Kang paced the length of the Situation Room, his normally calm demeanor cracking with each step. Behind him, a holographic display showed the latest territorial map of human space, with 12 red markers indicating Confederacy incursions in the past month alone. Protected species status. Kang slammed his fist on the table, causing the hologram to flicker. They're treating us like endangered animals, not equals. Admiral Junho Lee sat quietly, watching his old friend vent the frustration they all felt. 6 months had passed since first contact with the Galactic Confederacy, and the initial diplomatic optimism had soured into growing tension. It's a deliberate insult, Kang continued. They patrol our borders without permission, scan our colonies, and when we protest, they claim they're protecting us from threats. The Confederacy isn't united in this approach, said Diplomatic Officer Yoon Ji-yoon. sliding a data tablet across the table. According to our sources, several member species advocated for our equal status. It's the Cracks faction that pushed hardest for our classification as a protected species. Lee picked up the tablet, scanning the intelligence report. The Cracks. They've been the most aggressive in testing our boundaries. The door slid open, and Science Director Hyejin Kim entered, her face grave. It's worse than we thought. Our deep space sensors detected Confederacy ships downloading data from our colony mainframes. They're mapping everything: our population centers, resource distribution, defense systems. A heavy silence fell over the room. They're preparing for something, Kang said quietly. Or someone is, Lee corrected. We need to distinguish between Confederacy policy and Cracks aggression. You nodded. The Cracks have a history of absorbing protected species into their direct control. They provide security, then gradually replace local governance with their own administrators. They won't find us so easy to control, Kang growled. Lee stood up, his decision made. We've maintained our technological secrets as instructed. Now it's time to deploy our best asset. I'm sending the Thunderchild to patrol the outer colonies. Captain Juan Park stood by the viewport on the Thunderchild's bridge, watching the blue-white swirl of hyperspace envelope the ship. After months of diplomatic missions, they were finally doing what the ship was built for: protecting human interests. Hyperspace exit in 3 minutes, Captain, announced Navigator Minna, her fingers dancing across the control panel. We'll emerge at the edge of the Epsilon system. Park nodded. Colony Epsilon was humanity's most distant outpost, a research station and mining operation, with a population of just under 5,000. Its distance from Earth made it particularly vulnerable. Tactical status? Park asked. All systems nominal, replied Defense Officer Doyen. Conventional shields and weapons on standby. The special package is secure and dormant. The special package. The ship's true power remained a closely guarded secret. Only a handful of crew members knew its full capabilities. Most believed they were serving on an ordinary patrol vessel. Communications from Epsilon Colony are spotty, reported Communications Officer Sun-Ho Choi, adjusting his earpiece. They're experiencing interference. Deliberate jamming? Park asked. Possibly. Pattern suggests targeted disruption rather than natural phenomena. The ship shuddered slightly as it exited hyperspace. The view screen cleared to show the distant glow of Epsilon's star. Long-range scan, Park ordered. The tactical display lit up immediately with multiple contacts. Captain, I'm reading 7. No, 12 vessels in orbit around Epsilon. Doyen reported, his voice tight. Configuration matches Cracks warships. They're running active scans of the colony. Park's jaw tightened. The Cracks were the most militaristic faction within the Confederacy, known for their aggressive expansion. During diplomatic meetings, their representatives had been particularly dismissive of humans. Are they within weapons range of the colony? She asked. Yes, Captain. Their formation suggests a blockade. Colony defenses are active but wouldn't last 5 minutes against that battle group. Park considered their options. The Thunderchild could destroy the entire Cracks fleet with one activation of its secret weapon, but using it would reveal humanity's technological advancement and potentially trigger a wider conflict. Open a channel to the colony, she ordered. Choi worked his console. I can't get through the interference, Captain. Wait, incoming transmission from the Lid Cracks vessel. On screen, Park said, straightening her uniform. The view screen remained blank. Audio only, Captain, Choi explained. A deep, gravelly voice filled the bridge. Unidentified human vessel. This is Admiral Krull of the Cracks Enforcement Division. You have entered a security operation zone. Power down your engines and prepare for boarding. Park's eyebrows rose. They can't seriously think we'll comply with that. Should I respond, Captain? Choi asked. Yes. Inform Admiral Krull that this is Captain Juan Park of the HSS Thunderchild. We are in human territory responding to a distress call from our colony. Their vessels should withdraw immediately. Choi relayed the message. There was a long pause before the response came. Captain Park. Krull's voice seemed almost amused. Your colony is being investigated for prohibited weapons development. Under our protection treaty, the cracks are authorized to conduct inspections as needed. We sign no such treaty, Park replied firmly. Epsilon is sovereign human territory. Your Central Earth government approved Confederacy protection. Krull countered. The Cracks Division enforces Confederacy security protocols. Your vessel is outclassed and outgunned. Withdraw, or we will demonstrate the consequence of interference. The transmission cut off abruptly. They're repositioning, Do-Yun reported. 4 warships breaking from the colony orbit, heading towards us. Weapons signatures are active. Park turned to her senior officers. Options. We could withdraw, report to Central Command, suggested First Officer Geo. Our conventional weapons can't match even one of their vessels. If we retreat, we abandon the colony, Do-Yun countered. Reports suggest the cracks inspections often end with permanent occupation. Park walked to the tactical display, studying the approaching vessels. Choi, any response from the colony? I've managed to bypass some of the jamming, Captain. Text only. Colony Administrator CO reports the cracks have already landed troops at the main facility. They're collecting data cores and detaining research personnel. Park's eyes hardened. This was no inspection. It was an invasion using protection as a pretext. Set course for Epsilon, she ordered. Maximum speed. The bridge crew exchanged glances, but nobody questioned the order. The Thunderchild surged forward, accelerating toward the colony and the approaching Cracks vessels. Captain, Choi said urgently, Admiral Krull is hailing us again. Put him through. This time, the screen activated, showing a reptilian humanoid with scale-covered skin and vertical pupils. Admiral Krull's uniform bore dozens of combat medals, and the bridge behind him buzzed with activity. Captain Park, he said, showing teeth that looked designed for tearing flesh, I'm impressed by your courage, if not your intelligence. Perhaps you don't understand your situation. Park met his gaze steadily. I understand that your forces are illegally occupying the human colony. Krull's expression might have been a smile. There is nothing illegal about protecting primitive species from themselves. Your colony was developing bioadaptive technologies without proper containment protocols. We're simply preventing you from causing harm to yourselves and others. Admiral, remove your forces immediately, or we will consider this an act of war. Krull laughed, a harsh sound like stones grinding together. War? You have one outdated vessel. We have a battle fleet. The Confederacy classified humans as protected species precisely because you lack the advancement to defend yourselves. He leaned closer to the screen. You face the might of 12 Cracks warships, human. Surrender or be obliterated. Park's hand moved slightly, signaling to Do-Yun without looking away from the screen. The tactical officer understood immediately, his fingers moving to a secured panel that required his personal authentication code. We will not surrender, Park said calmly. You have 30 seconds to begin withdrawal. Krull's amusement vanished. You dare threaten the Cracks. This discussion is over. Prepare to witness the consequence of your defiance. The screen went dark. All Cracks vessels are powering weapons, Do-Yun reported. They're moving to surround us. Park took a deep breath. Central Command had been clear. The Thunderchild's true capability was to be used only as a last resort. That moment had come. Begin power transfer to the central core, she ordered quietly. Prepare the defensive protocols. As the crew rushed to obey, Park watched the Cracks warships approach on the tactical display. They were arranged in an attack formation, confident in their superior numbers and technology. They had no idea what they were facing. The Thunderchild hung in space, seemingly fragile against the backdrop of 12 massive Cracks vessels arranged in attack formation. From the outside, the human ship appeared unimpressive, its gray hull bearing the scars of micrometeorite impacts, its size barely 1/5 that of the smallest Krax warship. The alien vessels surrounded it in a sphere pattern, their sleek, predatory designs emphasized by pulsing red weapon ports along their hulls. On the bridge of the Thunderchild, Captain Juan Park stood with perfect posture, her face illuminated by the glow of tactical displays. Around her, the crew worked with quiet efficiency, each person aware of what might come next. "They're targeting our engine systems," reported Defense Officer Doyun, his voice steady despite the stress. "Their weapons are powered but not yet locked." "Status of the colony?" Park asked. Communications Officer Sun Ho Choi shook his head. "Still jammed, Captain." Last message indicated Krax forces were seizing research data and placing colonists under protective custody. Park nodded once, her expression grim. What had started as a border dispute had quickly escalated to invasion. The Krax clearly believed humans would back down rather than fight against overwhelming odds. "Incoming transmission," Choi announced. "Admiral Kroll again." "On screen," Park ordered. The reptilian face of Admiral Kroll filled the main view screen, his scaled features arranged in what humans had learned was an expression of smug satisfaction. "One last chance, Captain Park," Admiral Kroll's voice dripped with contempt. "Your ship is impressive, for a primitive species, but it cannot stand against us." Park met his gaze steadily. "Admiral, I again request that you withdraw your forces from human territory." Kroll made a dismissive gesture with a clawed hand. "Your territory is under Confederacy protection now. The Krax division has determined your colony was developing dangerous technologies without proper safeguards. We're simply fulfilling our duty. By landing troops. By detaining our people." Park's voice remained calm despite her anger. "That's not protection, Admiral. It's invasion." "Call it what you wish," Kroll replied. "The fact remains that you face 12 battle-proven warships with a single outdated vessel. Even if the rest of the Confederacy disagrees with our methods, they'll accept our actions once we present evidence of the colony's violations." First Officer Geo leaned close to Park. "Captain, they're moving their ground forces into the colony's central research facility. Whatever they're looking for, they'll find it soon." Park nodded slightly. Time was running out for a peaceful resolution, if that had ever been possible. "Admiral," she said, "I must inform you that the Thunderchild is more than capable of defending itself and our colony." For the first time, Kroll looked genuinely amused. His vertical pupils widened slightly as he laughed. "With what? Our scans show your weapon systems are barely adequate for asteroid defense. Your shields would collapse under sustained fire from even one of our destroyers." He leaned forward. "I studied your species, Captain. Humans talk boldly but surrender quickly when faced with superior force." Park's expression didn't change, but those who knew her well could see the dangerous glint in her eyes. "If you've studied us," she replied, "then you know humans have a long history of being underestimated." Kroll's patience was clearly wearing thin. "Enough talk. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded, or we will open fire. You have 2 minutes to comply." The screen went dark. "Captain," Weapons Officer Minho Ryu said quietly from his station, "they've locked weapons on us. All 12 ships." Park turned to look at each of her senior officers. They all knew what the Thunderchild could do, and what using its primary weapon would mean. Once that line was crossed, there would be no going back. "Options?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "We can't outrun them," Navigator Minha said. "Even at maximum speed, their pursuit craft would catch us before we reached the jump point. Conventional weapons would be like throwing stones at a fortress," Do-hyun added. "We might damage one ship before the others destroy us." First Officer Jiho met Park's gaze. "The colony has 5,000 civilians, Captain. If we retreat, we abandon them." Park closed her eyes briefly, remembering Director Kim's warning during the final briefing before the Thunderchild's maiden voyage. "Once activated, we cannot control the outcome completely." The singularity cannon was the result of decades of secret research, humanity's insurance policy in a dangerous universe. Scientists had discovered that the fabric of space-time could be manipulated to create a temporary artificial gravitational singularity, essentially a contained black hole. The technology had been developed not out of aggression, but fear. Earth's history was filled with stories of more advanced civilizations destroying less developed ones. They had vowed not to become another such story. Park opened her eyes and gave a slight nod to Weapons Officer Minho Ryu. 90 seconds to their deadline, Captain, Choi reported. Open a channel to Admiral Kroll, Park ordered. The Admiral's face appeared again, his expression now hardened with resolve. Have you come to your senses, Captain? Admiral Kroll, she said calmly. Perhaps you should have studied Earth's history more carefully. Kroll's eyes narrowed. Is that your answer? Defiance. It's a warning, Park replied. Humans developed in isolation on a highly competitive world. We spent most of our history fighting each other because we had no external threats. When we finally united, we directed that same ingenuity toward ensuring our survival among the stars. Spare me your species biography, Kroll sneered. Your time is running out. We kept certain technologies hidden, Park continued as if he hadn't spoken. Not out of deception, but caution. We hoped never to use them. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed Kroll's reptilian features. What are you talking about? The Thunderchild isn't a conventional warship, Admiral. It's a prototype, the only one of its kind. 30 seconds, Captain, Choi whispered. Park ignored him, her eyes locked with Kroll's. I'm giving you one final chance to withdraw. Not out of fear, but compassion. Kroll stared at her for a long moment, then barked a laugh. You're bluffing. Nothing on your vessel could threaten my fleet. You're wrong, Park said simply, and I regret what happens next. She cut the transmission and turned to her weapons officer. Mr. Ryu, prepare the singularity cannon. Ryu's fingers moved across his console, entering a complex sequence of commands. A panel slid open, revealing a biometric scanner and a physical key system, redundant security measures for the most dangerous weapon humans had ever created. Captain's authorization required, the ship's computer announced. Park placed her palm on the scanner and looked into the retinal reader. Captain Juwon Park, authorization Omega 73 Alpha. Identity confirmed, the computer responded. Singularity cannon preparation sequence initiated. Throughout the ship, non-essential systems began powering down. Lighting dimmed, and the familiar hum of the engines changed pitch as energy was redirected to the ship's core. Evacuation of forward sections complete, reported First Officer Gio. All crew secured in shielded compartments. Singularity matrix charging, Ryu announced, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. 20%, 30%. On the view screen, the Krax fleet remained in formation, their weapons glowing with building energy. They're preparing to fire, Do-Yun reported. Initial volley in 15 seconds. Will we be ready? Park asked Ryu. Singularity matrix at 60%, he replied. Minimum effective charge is 80%. Park nodded, her decision made. Initiate evasive pattern delta. Buy us the time we need. The Thunderchild suddenly lurched into motion, its maneuvering thrusters firing in a complex sequence designed to make the ship difficult to target. The Krax vessels adjusted, their targeting systems predicting the human ship's movement. Incoming fire, Do-Yun shouted. Energy beams from 3 Krax vessels converged on the Thunderchild's position, but the ship had already moved. The bridge shook as a glancing hit struck the outer hull. Conventional shields holding at 60%, Gio reported. Minor damage to outer hull plates. Singularity matrix at 75%, Ryu said, his eyes fixed on his console. 80%. Matrix charged and stable. Park took a deep breath. Once they crossed this line, human-confederacy relations would be forever changed. But the Krax had left them no choice. Target the center of their formation, she ordered. Minimum yield setting. Rue's fingers danced across his controls. Target locked. Cannon primed and ready. The bridge fell silent. Everyone present knew they were about to reveal humanity's greatest secret and potentially start a war. Admiral Krull is hailing us again, Choi said quietly. Ignore it, Park replied. Then, with firm resolution in her voice, Mr. Ryu, fire. Ryu pressed his palm against the final authorization panel. Firing. From the outside, the Thunderchild's transformation was subtle but unmistakable. A section of hull near the ship's bow slid open, revealing a circular aperture that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. For a brief moment, nothing happened. Then, without beam or projectile, a single point of absolute darkness appeared in space, directly between the human vessel and the Crack's fleet. The Singularity cannon had fired, and the universe held its breath. The Thunderchild's hull began to shimmer as power redirected from all systems to the ship's core. A faint blue glow traced the outline of the vessel, pulsing like a heartbeat as the Singularity matrix reached full charge. Inside the ship, lights dimmed to emergency levels, and non-essential systems shut down automatically. Captain Juan Park gripped the arms of her command chair, her knuckles white. The bridge was eerily quiet, the usual background hum of electronics reduced to a whisper as power drained toward the weapons system. Singularity matrix at full capacity, reported Weapons Officer Minho Ryu, his voice barely above a whisper. Containment field stable. Ready to release on your command. Park nodded, her face illuminated by the soft red glow of emergency lighting. Status of the Crack's fleet. Still in attack formation, First Officer Gio replied. They appear to be waiting. They're curious, Park said. They detected our power surge, but don't understand what's happening. On the tactical display, the 12 Crack's warships maintained their positions, weapons hot, but not yet firing. Their hesitation might cost them everything. All personnel are secured in shielded compartments, Do-hyun reported. Structural integrity field at maximum. Park took a deep breath. Mr. Ryu, activate the cannon. Cannon activated. Firing sequence initiated. On the bridge of the Crack's flagship, Admiral Krull watched the human vessel with growing suspicion. Something wasn't right. The small ship should have surrendered or full by now. Instead, it remained motionless, its hull emitting an unusual energy signature unlike anything in Crack's records. A junior officer turned to Admiral Krull, confusion evident in his scaled features. Sir, I'm detecting an unusual energy signature from the human vessel. Power levels are increasing exponentially, but I can't identify the source or purpose. Krull leaned forward in his command chair, suddenly less certain of his advantage. Is it a weapon? The officer checked his readings again. Unknown, sir. Energy pattern doesn't match any known weapon system. It could be. He hesitated. Speak, officer, Krull demanded. Probably their self-destruct sequence. Krull laughed, though with less confidence than before. How noble. They choose destruction over surrender. Another officer spoke up. Sir, recommend we destroy the vessel immediately. Whatever they're doing. They're stalling, Krull interrupted, hoping for reinforcements that won't arrive in time. Prepare tow. His orders died in his throat as the sensors blared an alert. Something was happening. When the Thunderchild fired, there was no dramatic beam of light, no explosion of energy. Instead, a small point of absolute darkness materialized between the opposing fleets. It hung in space, seemingly harmless, a perfect sphere of nothingness against the backdrop of stars. Singularity deployed, Ryu reported, his voice tense. Containment field stable. Beginning controlled expansion. Park leaned forward. Colony status. Still standing, Geo confirmed. The Singularity's position should keep the colony well outside the effect radius. On the main view screen, the dark sphere slowly expanded, growing from the size of a marble to that of a small car. Still, nothing else happened. The Crack's ships remained in position, apparently confused by what they were witnessing. "They don't realize what it is," Navigator Minnow whispered. "They will," Park replied grimly. In about 3 seconds. On the Crack's flagship, alarms blared as sensors detected something unprecedented. "Sir," the science officer shouted, "that object, it's generating an immense gravitational field." Kroll rose from his chair, his reptilian eyes fixed on the viewing portal, where the small dark sphere was now visible to the naked eye. "Evasive action. All ships withdraw immediately." But it was too late. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then reality itself seemed to bend around that point of darkness. The nearest Crack ship, a heavy cruiser named Dominance, began to drift toward the sphere. At first, the movement was barely perceptible, but it quickly accelerated. "The Dominance can't break free," shouted the communications officer. "Their engines are at maximum, but they're being pulled in." Kroll watched in horror as the front section of the Dominance elongated, stretching impossibly as if made of rubber rather than advanced alloys. Metal, designed to withstand the most powerful conventional weapons in the galaxy, began to flow like water toward the dark sphere. "What is this?" Kroll demanded, his voice cracking. "What weapon is this?" No one answered. No one had an answer to give. The Dominance stretched further, its structure collapsing as it accelerated toward the singularity. Then, with a final flash of light as its power core breached, the massive warship vanished into the darkness, leaving nothing behind. One by one, in rapid succession, the remaining 11 ships were pulled in, their hulls buckling under forces no material could withstand. Some attempted to flee, their engines burning white-hot as they fought against the inexorable pull. Others fired desperately at the singularity, their most powerful weapons passing into the darkness without effect. On his flagship, the last vessel remaining, Admiral Kroll sent a final transmission to the waiting human ship. "What have you done?" he demanded, fear replacing arrogance in his voice. "This violates all known laws of physics." Captain Park's calm face appeared on his screen. "No, Admiral. It obeys them perfectly. You should have left us alone." The transmission cut as the flagship began its final approach to oblivion. Kroll ordered his crew to evacuation pods, but it was a futile gesture. The gravitational forces tore the smaller craft apart even more quickly than the larger vessels. Kroll remained on the bridge, watching through the viewport as his ship stretched toward the darkness. In his final moments, the Admiral understood his mistake. The humans hadn't been bluffing. They hadn't been primitive. They had simply been waiting. On the Thunderchild, the bridge crew watched in silence as the last Crack's vessel disappeared into the singularity. Where a proud battle fleet had stood only minutes earlier, only scattered debris remained, small pieces that had been torn from the ships before they crossed the event horizon. "Begin containment sequence," Park ordered quietly. Ryu's fingers moved across his console. "Initiating containment. Singularity will collapse in 10 seconds. The sphere of darkness began to shrink, condensing back toward its origin point. As it did, the scattered debris spiraled inward, following the retreating gravitational field. 5 seconds. 3, 1. Singularity collapsed and contained. The view screen showed empty space where the Crack's fleet had been. Not even dust remained. Park released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Damage report. Minor structural stress along forward sections," Do-Yun reported. "Nothing serious. All systems returning to normal operating parameters." The colony. "Communications are clearing up," Choi said. "Colony Administrator CO reports the Crack's ground forces have lost contact with their fleet. They're requesting evacuation." Park almost laughed at the irony. "Inform the Administrator that the Crack soldiers are welcome to surrender. Their fleet won't be coming for them." The bridge remained subdued as the reality of what they had done sank in. 12 advanced warships and their crews, gone in moments. The Singularity cannon had performed exactly as designed, perhaps too well. "Begin power-up sequence for conventional systems," Park ordered. and send a priority message to Earth's Central Command. They need to know what's happened here. As the crew carried out her orders, Park moved to the viewport, looking out at the stars and the empty space where the Krax fleet had been. The Singularity Cannon had been developed as a last resort, a weapon so powerful it would make humanity too dangerous to conquer. Today, it had served that purpose, but at what cost? The Confederacy would learn what humans were capable of. The question now was whether that knowledge would bring peace through respect or war through fear. "Captain," Geo said quietly, joining her at the viewport. "We did what we had to do." Park nodded slowly. "Yes, but everything changes now." She turned to face her first officer. "Prepare a team to assist the colony, and have security ready to take those Krax soldiers into custody. The Confederacy is about to learn a great deal about humanity, starting with how we treat prisoners of war." As the Thunderchild moved toward the colony, the debris field began to disperse, tiny fragments scattering into the vastness of space, the only evidence that a fleet had ever been there at all. The massive dome of the Confederacy Council chamber curved overhead like an artificial sky, its translucent material displaying the star patterns of 17 different homeworlds. Representatives from each member species sat in concentric rings facing the central platform, where the recording had just finished playing. The silence that followed was absolute. The recording had shown everything. The Krax fleet surrounding the Thunderchild, the activation of the weapon, the appearance of the Singularity, and the terrifying moments that followed as 12 advanced warships were pulled into nothingness. The final transmission from Admiral Kroll played again in everyone's mind. "What have you done?" High Chancellor Vex, an ancient Galari whose azure skin had faded to pale blue with age, finally broke the silence. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep distress in his species. "An artificial gravitational singularity. Impossible." His voice echoed through the chamber. "Such technology would require understanding of quantum mechanics beyond anything in Confederacy records." Science Minister Haejin Kim stood calmly before them in her formal black uniform, her posture relaxed despite being the focus of hundreds of alien eyes. Behind her stood a small delegation of humans, including Defense Minister Taewoo Kang and Admiral Juno Lee. "Not impossible," Kim replied, her voice clear and confident. "Just difficult." A low murmur spread through the chamber as translation devices rendered her words in 17 different languages. "Difficult," sputtered Ambassador Torek, his mandibles clicking rapidly. "You've created a weapon that can generate and control a black hole. The energy requirements alone would be substantial." Kim finished for him. "Yes, which is why the Singularity Cannon can only be fired once before requiring a full reactor recharge. It's not a practical weapon for extended combat." The representatives exchanged uneasy glances. The idea that humans considered such a devastating weapon impractical was perhaps more frightening than the weapon itself. Chancellor Vex leaned forward. "Minister Kim, you must understand our concern. Your species concealed this technology during all diplomatic exchanges. The Krax may have overstepped their authority, but your response was extreme." "Was it?" Defense Minister Kang stepped forward to stand beside Kim. 12 warships entered our territory without permission. They landed troops on our colony. They detained our citizens. In human history, we call that an invasion. The Krax acted without council authorization, admitted a representative from the Melra, a peaceful species known for their diplomatic skills. But the fact remains that humanity kept this technology secret while presenting itself as a developing species worthy of protection. Kim nodded. "We did. Just as your own records show the Melra concealed their telepathic abilities for 3 centuries after joining the Confederacy." The Melra representative's skin flushed a deep purple in what humans had learned was embarrassment. "How did you know that?" Chancellor Vex demanded. "Those records are sealed." Admiral Lee stepped forward. "The Krax weren't the only ones gathering intelligence, Chancellor. We've been studying the Confederacy since first contact. Knowledge is survival." A new voice joined the conversation. Darok, representative of the Viziri, the oldest species in the Confederacy. I believe I understand now. Your homeworld, Earth. It is crowded with competing species, is it not? You evolved not as the dominant life form, but as one of many. Yes, Kim confirmed. Humans share Earth with millions of other species. Our history is one of constant adaptation and competition. And war, Darok added softly. Your historical archives speak of continuous conflict between human groups. We don't deny our violent past, Kang replied. But it taught us valuable lessons. When we finally reached the stars, we vowed not to repeat our mistakes. The singularity cannon was developed as a deterrent, not a first-strike weapon. A deterrent that you kept hidden, Chancellor Vex pointed out. Would you have welcomed us as equals if you'd known? Lee asked. Or would you have classified us as a threat to be contained? The silence that followed was answer enough. We came before you today not to threaten, but to correct a misunderstanding, Kim said. Humans aren't primitive beings in need of protection. We're a species that has learned to survive against long odds, by whatever means necessary. Chancellor Vex conferred quietly with other council members before turning back to the human delegation. The council will need time to deliberate on this matter. Please withdraw while we discuss. 3 days later, Captain Juan Park stood at attention in her dress uniform as the council reconvened. The Thunderchild had returned to Earth immediately after the incident, but Park had been summoned to Central Confederacy Station to testify about the encounter with the Krax fleet. She watched as Chancellor Vex rose to address the chamber. After careful consideration and review of all evidence, this council finds that the Krax division acted without proper authorization in their aggressive approach to human territory. Their actions violated multiple Confederacy protocols regarding protected species. Park kept her expression neutral, though she disliked the continued use of that term. However, Vex continued, it is also clear that humanity's classification as a protected species was based on incomplete information. The technological capabilities demonstrated by the HS Thunderchild indicate a level of advancement compatible with full membership status. A ripple of murmurs spread through the chamber. Therefore, effective immediately, Earth and all human colonies are reclassified. Humanity is granted full membership in the Galactic Confederacy, with all rights and responsibilities therein. The announcement was met with mixed reactions. Some representatives nodded in approval. Others seemed concerned. A few appeared openly hostile. Park understood their hesitation. The Confederacy had just learned that a species they had patronized possessed the ability to destroy entire fleets with a single weapon. As the formal session ended, Park found herself approached by Science Minister Kim and Admiral Lee. Congratulations, Captain, Kim said with a small smile. Your actions at Epsilon have changed the course of human history. Park's expression remained solemn. At the cost of thousands of Krax lives their leaders gambled with, Lee reminded her. You protected our colony and our people. Together, they began walking through the grand hall of the council building. Park noticed how aliens who had once looked at humans with amusement or condescension now stepped aside respectfully. Some even bowed slightly as the human delegation passed. They understand us better now, said Admiral Lee, watching a group of alien dignitaries whispering as they passed. Yes, Park nodded. They finally understand that humans developed such weapons not because we wanted to, but because our history taught us to be prepared. They paused near a large viewing port that overlooked the sprawling Confederacy station. In a nearby chamber, a group of Confederacy scientists had gathered around displays showing redacted versions of human technological achievements. The destruction of the Krax fleet had sparked intense interest in human science, particularly in theoretical physics. What happens now? Park asked quietly. The Krax will demand retaliation. The Krax have been censured by the Council, Kim replied. Their remaining fleets have been ordered to stand down. Without Admiral Kroll, their most aggressive leader, they're unlikely to risk further confrontation. And the other species? Lee gestured toward the group of Confederacy scientists eagerly examining human technological displays. Some fear us. Others respect us. Many are simply curious. But none will make Krull's mistake again. Perhaps next time, Park said quietly, they'll lead with respect rather than mockery. As they continued through the hall, a young Torek approached them. Unusual, as the insectoid species had been among the most dismissive of humans during first contact. Captain Park, the Torek said, mandibles moving carefully to pronounce the human name. I am Scholar Kurek. I wish to understand something about humans. Park nodded for him to continue. Your species developed this weapon capable of creating artificial singularities, yet you did not use it first. You warned the cracks. You offered them the chance to withdraw. The Torek's antennae twitched in what Park had learned indicated confusion. Why? Park considered the question carefully. Because a weapon like that should never be used lightly. Because even in war, choices matter. Because we hoped, until the last moment, that force wouldn't be necessary. Fascinating, Kurek replied. Most species who develop such power use it to conquer. Your restraint is unexpected. Humans have a complicated relationship with power, Admiral Lee explained. Our history taught us that those who rush to use it often come to regret it. After the Torek departed, they continued toward the docking bay where a shuttle waited to return them to Earth. News of humanity's reclassification would be spreading across human colonies, bringing both pride and responsibility. Do you think they'll ever truly understand us? Park asked, as they prepared to board. Kim smiled slightly. Perhaps not entirely. But they'll learn, as we will learn about them. That's what equals do. As the shuttle departed the station, Park looked back at the massive structure housing the Confederacy Council. For better or worse, humanity had announced its presence in the galactic community. They had sought peaceful cooperation, but had demonstrated their unwillingness to be subjugated. The stars stretched before them as the shuttle accelerated toward the jump point that would take them home. Whatever came next, humans would face it not as protected primitives, but as equals among the stars, respected not for their aggression, but for their determination to survive.